Officially known as the Republic of Chad, Chad is a landlocked country in north-central Africa. It is bordered by Libya, Sudan, the Central African Republic, Cameroon, Nigeria, and Niger. The country is named after a Kanuri word for large expanse of water or lake. This means that calling it Lake Chad, which is the second largest wetland in Africa, is basically like saying Lake. Chad is divided into 3 distinct zones. The Sudanian savanna in the south, which has fertile land and broad grasslands. The Sahara Desert in the north, which is almost completely barren except for a few date palm groves surrounding oases. And what is called the Sahelian Belt in the center, which is the transitional zone between the desert and the savanna. This area has mostly palms and acacia trees. Deforestation is a major issue for wildlife and for the environment, as it allows the desert in the north to advance further south. More than 1.2 million trees have been planted to avoid this. Across the country are elephants, lions, buffalo, hippopotamuses, rhinoceroses, giraffes, antelopes, leopards, cheetahs, hyenas, crocodiles, and many species of snakes. However, poaching has had a large toll on wildlife populations. Elephants are often massacred in herds in national parks by organised poachers for their valuable ivory. These poachers have even been known to murder the national park's rangers, and so the parks are usually understaffed. As of 2019, Chad had a population of 16 million people, with more than 200 distinct ethnic groups. Chad's official languages are Arabic and French, but over 100 languages and dialects are spoken throughout the country. Its currency is the Central African franc, and its capital and largest city is N'Djamena. Its main religions are Islam with 52% and Christianity with 44%, with a small portion practicing indigenous religions including animism. Chadians enjoy traditional contests of strength and skill. In the south, foot races are often featured in coming-of-age rites, with courses extending up to 100 miles or more. Football is Chad's most popular sport, with basketball and freestyle wrestling also being widely practiced. Freestyle wrestling involves wrestlers putting on traditional animal hides and covering themselves with dust. In the hotter, drier north, camel races, archery competitions, and wrestling matches mark traditional wintertime festivals. The staple dish for many is made from ground millet, which is made into balls and dipped into sauces. They also eat a variety of meat and vegetable stews, as well as dried or smoked fish. Chad is listed as a failed state, meaning that its political body has disintegrated to a point where the basic responsibilities of a government no longer function properly. It is also tied with Bangladesh for being the most corrupt country in the world. It is the 7th poorest country, with 80% of the population living below the poverty line. Despite their natural oil supply, only 1.5% of the population has access to electricity, with the vast majority burning biomass fuels such as wood and animal manure for power. Only 48% of city residents have access to potable water, and only 2% to basic sanitation. 47% of the country's population is under 15 years old, and the average life expectancy is 52 years, with the primary causes of death including lower respiratory infections, malaria, and HIV/AIDS. School attendance of children aged 5 to 14 is only 39%, and more than half of the population is illiterate. 53% of children this age are used for child labour, and 30% of children aged 7 to 14 do a mix of school and labour. Female genital mutilation is prohibited, but the practice remains widespread and deeply rooted in tradition, with 45% of women undergoing the procedure. Women lack equal opportunities in education and in general rights, with inheritance often favouring men, as is the traditional practice. Polygamy is also legal and common. In the 1960s, Chad was a mining hub for minerals like natron, gold, wolframite, bauxite, uranium, silver, and alluvial diamonds. Unfortunately, years of civil unrest and war scared away many foreign investors. In 2003, Chad began mining for oil, which quickly became the country's most important resource and export. Over 80% of the population relies on subsistence farming and livestock raising for its livelihood. However, this is also the major cause of deforestation. The United Nations recognizes that the country is in crisis. However, aid is difficult to supply. Organizations such as Save the Children have suspended activities due to the killings of aid workers. Chad is one of the several potential sites for the cradle of humankind in Africa, following the discovery of the 7-million-year-old human-like skull, now known as the Hope of Life skull. After 3000 BC, the first trans-Saharan trade route was established through the country, and with it came one of the first prominent distinctive groups of people, the Sao Nation, who were famed for their fortified cities. Somewhere between the 8th and 10th centuries, the Kanem-bornu displaced the Sao. Then, in the 14th century, the Kanem kingdom was displaced by the Bulala, forcing them to move west. There, they founded the state of Bornu in the 15th century. In the 16th century, they took back their land from the Bulala, becoming the kanem-bornu kingdom. They maintained control of the trans-Saharan trade routes and would only travel south when they needed to raid villages for slaves. Slaves would come to make up 1/3 of the kanem-bornu population. Between the 15th and the 19th centuries, several Islamic empires would conquer and rule various parts of the area which now constitutes modern-day Chad. French colonials invaded in the late 19th century and claimed the land as part of French Equatorial Africa. The French did not put as much effort into colonizing the country as they did their other colonies, viewing Chad more as a source of untrained labor and raw cotton. During World War II, Chadian soldiers partook in the fighting for the liberation of Paris, after Paris was occupied by Nazi Germans. In 1958, French Equatorial Africa was dissolved, becoming Gabon, Congo, the Central African Republic, and Chad. However, France continues to give support to the nation even today. In 1960, Chad was granted full independence, with Francois Tombalbaye as its first president. 2 years later, Tombalbaye banned opposition parties and established a one-party system, and by 1965, the country was in a civil war that would span the next 14 years. In 1975, President Tombalbaye was overthrown and killed by his own army. The war continued until 1979, when rebel factions, led by Hissène Habré, took the capital. Libya tried to move in and take over during the chaos. However, this caused the Chadians to unite and force the Libyan army back out of the country. Habré ruled with corruption and violence until 1990, when he was overthrown by his own general, Idriss Déby. He was later tried for war crimes and for ordering the killing of 40,000 people. For this, he was given life in prison. Déby attempted to reconcile the rebel groups and reintroduced multi-party politics. By 2005, now President Déby, who dominated the political, military, and judicial systems, was suspected of voter fraud and media censorship, and made the decision to remove the limit on presidential terms. This move led to another civil war breaking out between the government and the rebels. The civil war quickly bled into the neighbouring civil conflict in Darfur. By late 2005, Chad and Sudan were at war, as both governments believed each other to be supporting their rebel enemies. Throughout Chad, the government arbitrarily arrested and detained civilians and suspected rebels, usually on the basis of ethnicity. Detainees were subjected to what has been described as cruel and unusual punishments. Many Chadian people fled to Sudan and vice versa during this time. 2010 marked the end of the war. Despite internal political opposition, coup attempts, and a civil war, Idriss Déby continuously ruled Chad from 1990 until his death in 2021. He is said to have been killed while visiting troops. Currently, his son, Mohamed Déby, who is a military general, has assumed control of the Chadian government. French President Emmanuel Macron has shown his support for Mohamed taking over for the duration of the transition to a new constitution and election. This is set to take place 13 months from now. Macron also said that members of the Military Transitional Council, including Mohamed, will not be able to run in the next presidential election. Set your timers to October 2022 to see if this holds up.